don't think another blank weekend for United means we're taking days off. Well, we are, quite literally. I'm on holiday. But it's just a chance to discuss what all this means from a financial point of view when the team get back on the pitch. A special episode with finance expert Jamie Bajwa, familiar hopefully for his subprime goals column and United Restand to lots of you. And the obvious question to start with, Jamie, is Champions League football. I saw someone on Twitter describe the Bournemouth game as a sliding doors moment, meaning that those 2 points could cost United Champions League football. If that were the case, what would be the summer cost in terms of finance, in terms of spend, in terms of squad?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty important and there's no getting around that. And I think the biggest thing is the flexibility we'll have on the transfer budget. So look, if you look at, say, last year and this year, kind of the cash that we'll be generating is somewhere in the region of like 190 million. I think our transfer budget would probably be a little bit less than that, maybe something around 150. If we manage to make the Champions League, I would see that pushing north of 200 million. And I think it could go as far as 250. And I think, one, that's because of the incremental money that we get from being in the Champions League. And the second thing is that it will make it a lot easier for us to sell those players that are currently out on loan or fringe players and get a better fee for them. So, the Champions League is important just from a baseline budget perspective, but then the added factor of, well, we'll be bringing in some fees for the likes of maybe a Xerxes, Agate, Onana, Rashford, Højlund, etc.
Why does it make it easier to sell players?
It helps your negotiating position, quite simply. Like, the reality is people know that we need to sell a bunch of players or want to sell a bunch of players. If you're in the Champions League, you have the finances to stomach them still being in your squad. Obviously, that will also have an impact on your transfer budget, but it basically kind of gives you more room to almost play a bluff with people. So when people talk about, oh, well, if Barcelona don't play ball, Marcus Rashford can come back to United and we'll reintegrate him back into the squad. Whether it's true or not, that type of language has a little bit more credence because we can afford to do it.
And if you take someone like Manuel Ugarte or Xerxes, who you've mentioned already, I guess you say to these clubs, well, listen, we don't need to worry about it. We've got these games guaranteed. We hope to go further, almost certain to go further into domestic cup competitions. So unlike this season, they'll get games. It's just not a bigger deal if you don't take them. There's the price.
Totally. And there is another element on top of that, which is, look, we're a squad that has just qualified for the Champions League and potentially, touchwood, hopefully, have done it pretty comfortably. Those players have played a role in that. Okay, they've not been starters, but that also has some inherent value that these are players that are good enough to get you into top 4, top 5 of the Premier League.
You mentioned there a big difference, like £100 million potentially to spend. Are we talking there about more players? Are we talking about potentially being in for better players?
I think it's a mix, and I think that's a decision that Jason Wilcox, Omar Barada, Christopher Vivell are going to have to make. I think, my personal opinion is that you need a bit of both. Particularly in the midfield, we need both bodies and quality of bodies because we're losing Casemiro. We all know how important he has been. I also have questions around Bruno, not in terms of his quality, but, I was there at Bournemouth. You saw it in the last 10 minutes, even though we're only playing one game a week, he was completely done. And so, we'll need backup for him. Can Mount cover that? Don't know. So I think, look, undoubtedly we need quality. And I think with where the priorities lie, they're not going to be cheap, right? You could easily see us spending 150 million alone on 2 top-class midfielders. That doesn't leave a lot of money elsewhere unless you're selling a big bunch of players. So, the readers of United We Stand will know that I think a couple of months ago, I talked about the academy being even more important. I think in this environment, the thing that I would, if I was an academy player looking at this and understanding the business side, I'd be doing everything I can to make sure if I get a chance, I'm ready to go, because I think if you're in the Champions League, we go further in the cup competitions, there's going to be plenty of minutes for you. And I think it will become a more important filler to round out the squad.
Is there any element of double-edged sword in this? Because you've talked about two midfielders there. They seem to be interested definitely in at least adding a couple of midfielders and at least one fullback. There are no secrets in the game anymore. So the fact that other teams know United have got this money, is that a lever in their negotiating armour?
It is, but I think that's where our negotiating skills will come into play, or, we will require them. So yes, everyone knows that we need players in certain positions. However, we have the benefit that, to coin the often used phrase, we're Manchester United and players would like to come and play for us and be part of this journey. So I think, that's where if you've done your due diligence and you've done your groundwork, you've constantly been talking to players and it's not just oh, hey, we're in for you. We really, really want you. I think all of that will play a role. You think about how, from what we hear from the likes of Andy Mitten about the groundwork that's effectively being done for Sesko, that, if we're giving agents a very clear remit on what needs to happen in order for the deal to get done, there's ways in which that can be negotiated. Doesn't mean it's going to be quick, doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but that's the onus is on us to get that part of the equation sorted.
Presumably then, there's the earlier you qualify for Champions League football, the better. There's going to be a game ahead in the next few weeks that settles that. It's not impossible. It could be Manchester United against Liverpool, right? So what would it mean to Liverpool to not qualify? They cannot have been expecting this season.
It will be pretty significant if they don't make it, for two reasons. Look, there's going to be a direct financial impact. They'll be missing out on probably somewhere in the region of 100 to 130 million of revenue. There will also, and that will be direct Champions League prize money. There will be also some kickers in their commercial contracts, which means that if they don't make it into the Champions League, the value that they'll get from those deals will fall. So you're looking at a pretty big revenue drop on top of a scenario where they have spent very, very big sums on the likes of Isak and Florian Wirtz. Now, look, part of the fall in revenue will be offset by they'll have clauses in their contracts, which, like we do, that reduces player wages by 25-30%. So it won't be the end of the world, but it will be significant in terms of reduce their firepower unless FSG decide to put a bit more cash behind them to kind of spend their way out of trouble.
Interesting. I heard, I think it was Kieran Maguire said the other day, and apologies if he's your mortal enemy in the football finance expert world, that nobody knows if Chelsea are a football club or a hedge fund experiment. They've just posted record losses without the details yet that we won't get until companies' house details can be accessed. What are they looking at? Is there a chance it could really go badly wrong for them?
Yeah, and I love Kieran. We speak and we're good friends. I think from Chelsea's perspective, the key thing for them is that they're under a sanction agreement with UEFA. So because they've spent so much, they made bigger losses than they were allowed. They submitted, as part of that kind of settlement agreement, they kind of gave a business plan to UEFA that they have to stick to in order to reduce their losses to about £52 million by the end of next season. Not being in the Champions League will be a hammer blow to that business plan because of the lost revenue. The other aspect is it'll make it even harder to get a front of shirt sponsorship. They had a golden opportunity last summer once they'd won the Club World Cup and made it to Champions League to sign someone. They didn't. They're holding out for, what the market is saying is too high a price. And that therefore means they're going to have to sell a whole load of players. And the big challenge for them is that they've already gone through a process where they've sold a lot of their youngsters in their academy for good money. The question will be can they repeat that trick? And they're probably also going to have to do it with some of their first team players. Now, they will be in the opposite scenario where, because everyone knows that they need to sell in order to meet the UEFA target, people will be driving the prices lower and lower and lower.
Be very, very funny if Brentford qualify for Champions League football then. Finally, and then a word on Tottenham. This is unbelievable, especially on the back of, what happened in Bilbao last May. Tottenham going down is kind of unthinkable, but it's possible.
It is possible. I mean, look, we were talking earlier. I did a bit of analysis on them a couple of weeks ago. I didn't think it was really possible until they lost to Nottingham Forest. And now I think it's it's def pos. I think, look, in terms of the impact to their finances, there's no way around it. It is monumental. They would have to go from meeting the Premier League kind of squad cost rule and PSR limits to the Championship PSR limits. Those limits are way stricter. So instead of having £105 million of allowable losses over 3 years, you'd have to go to just under 40. So that's a real big reduction. And when you're looking at a 200 to 250 revenue fall, that's a big bit of leeway to close up. So they will have to obviously reorganize a squad. Now, look, Daniel Levy gets a lot of criticism. He did actually put relegation clauses into player contracts. So if they do get relegated, everyone kind of gets their wages cut by 50%, which softens the blow. What the sporting department need to decide with the squad is, look, do you completely rework it, sell everyone, start again, or do you try and hang on to as many good players as possible in the hope that basically you're in there for one season and then you kind of bounce straight back? Both of them have, I think, pros and cons. The way that it seemed to be going with De Zerbi, it looks to me that they will just kind of try and hold their nose and bounce back straight away, try and hold on as many people as possible, sell some of the players like Van der Ven, Romero, who can probably fetch a big fee and help them kind of meet the PSR rules in the Championship. But the real concerning factor for me is, if you look at their numbers, you've got, on the cost side, you've got two big costs, right? You've got wages for staff and players, and then you've got like other operating expenses. So that could be your cost to deliver like marketing content, your general day-to-day bills. Those costs last year grew to 200 million. It was up by 40 million. So their underlying ability to make a profit is getting much, much worse.
It can all change. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say the kind of headline number is it's a 300 to 350 million hole in their finances on my numbers.
Football is a cruel mistress. We can all remember when we thought that the Europa League was a one-season adventure and Champions League football would flow again every year. What is the one big thing to finish on, the one big takeout for United fans that we really need to happen right between now and the end of the season?
Champions League football and more sponsorship deals. If you get those two, and my hope is that they've got some sponsorship deals lined up, if we qualify for Champions League football. If that happens, we go back to a bit more of a normal way of doing business. We'll have plenty of money to cycle through kind of like the debt situation, and we'll have plenty of money to go and buy players. And if the recruitment team continue to be as good as they have been since Ineos came in, we can start to get a bit more positive again.
Wow, maybe they'd even be able to cut some slack to match-going fans at some point. Cream of Manchester 1878@gmail.com if you want to get in touch, and we're on all the socials. Really grateful to Jamie Bajwa for joining us here. The most corporate podcast we've ever done. I'm even in a business hotel in Madrid. Mind the tranvías.